What's up, amigos? It's the Prodigy Maker Tennis Show, episode 97. Chris Lewitt back with you. Excited to talk about some wisdom, some lessons from my old coach and longtime mentors, my coach as a player and my mentor as a high performance coach, Gilad Bloom, the legendary Israeli professional and high performance coach. Gilad is kind of a legend around New York, where he was building players for over 20 years, and now he's moved to Barcelona. So Gilad had a tremendous impact on my tennis career, both as a player and as a coach. So I always say that I'm incredibly grateful for everything that he's taught me, both as a player and a coach. So what I wanted to do in this show is share with you guys, parents, players, coaches who are big fans of the show, some of the wisdom that I learned from Gilad. I have sort of a top 10 list. We'll see if we get to all 10. And I'll try to keep it succinct and actionable, helpful to all you guys out there. But in my opinion, Gilad is one of the best developmental coaches in the world, certainly one of the best technicians in the world. That means a technical coach who's great at transforming strokes and movement, particularly the serve and footwork. And so I'm excited to share with you guys some of what I learned from him over many, many years. And also, by sharing that with you guys, I also get to revisit some of those memories and some of those lessons from my own edification. You know, sometimes when you teach something to others, you learn it even better. You get to interact with the material and engage with the lessons even more. So it's fun for me too, just to share what I learned from Gilad. And so, number one, and not necessarily in any order, but when I think about Gilad and the way that he teaches, there's an obsession with technique. And technique is very, very high on the priority list. And the details of technique, all the little small details of a player, are incredibly important for Gilad. So that's something that I think all players and coaches, parents can take this lesson and really try to make sure, especially when a kid is young, that you pay very close attention to details. Sort of like the cliche, attention to details matter. I've never seen a coach so detail oriented as Gilad. And so the way that you can see that manifest when you're training or if you're coaching is lots of repetition with a very keen eye. You have to develop a very keen eye. As a player, you have to be very, very fastidious, very, very keen on detail, and make sure that all of the technical elements are in place so you can develop world-class strokes and world-class movement. A corollary of this is that you should do your cleaning every day. And that's something that I think I learned in Spain, that I fell in love with, the idea of daily cleaning, the idea of working the movement, working the footwork, working the technique daily. That was a big, major philosophical thrust of Pato Alvarez, the great Spanish coach, is daily cleaning. So if you're a player, coach, make sure you're cleaning the fundamentals every day and you're not letting the little details slip through. And so that is, I think, when I think of Gilad Bloom, I never met anyone so technical and so detail oriented, and I brought that into my coaching. It helped me out a lot. And I think one of the criticisms that both Gilad and I have of modern coaching that you see all around the United States, really all across the world now, I see a lot of games-based approach. You see red, orange, green paradigms, type pedagogy. And I just think in many respects, from my perspective and from Gilad's perspective, those programs are failing to teach kids world-class fundamentals. And I think that's why it's so cool that you can still find, people like me, people like Gilad, who will teach your kid world-class technique, who will do the repetitions necessary to get great fundamentals. And that's something that I think is being lost in today's coaching. Coaches are playing more games. Coaches are focusing more on quote-unquote fun. And the fundamentals, the skill-based approach is being lost in many respects and in many different avenues and venues of coaching around the world, particularly in clubs. where sometimes the emphasis is on just fun and, giving kids a good time rather than teaching world-class technique. So details matter. Technique first. Technique is important. Technique is a priority, especially for young champions, kids who want to become prodigies, for example. Another thing that comes to mind when I think about Gilad Bloom and his style of coaching is he's incredibly physical, and that's something that I brought to my coaching. And if you ever take a lesson with me, you'll feel that it's physical. And what I mean by that is the coach is almost like a fitness trainer. The coach is demanding physically. The coach is going to include a lot of taxing drills and exercises, and the intensity is very, very high in every session. And so that level, that bar, I think Gilad sets that bar incredibly high. He expects a lot of tough work, and that over time will make a kid, any student, stronger. Not only stronger physically, but also stronger mentally. So when you have tough lessons, tough physical training in the lesson, not even separate from the lesson. I mean, a good trainer can also teach this. And in the Spanish model, sometimes they have the trainer also helping to develop this physical superiority. But Gilad really believes in being an athlete first, being in great physical condition, and that particularly every lesson should be intense, and you should push hard and challenge yourself. So if you're a player, make every session intense. If you're a coach, be demanding and push your players physically, and don't just have sort of soft, sort of country club type lessons, which tend to not be very physically taxing. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb. Now, there are some exceptions. Sometimes you may need a lower intensity day or a moderate intensity day, or there's times where you need to titrate down training intensity when you're getting ready for a tournament. You need to adjust, periodize the schedule. But just as a general rule, a lesson should be tough. A lesson should be physical. The player should feel challenged, and the player should not only physically but mentally, and over time that creates stronger players who can endure more. And I think that's why, having studied with Gilad so many years, I love the Spanish way of training. Later on in my career, I went to study with many great coaches in Spain, and they believe in the same thing. They believe that training should be tough, and they believe in pushing really hard on the court, both as a player and a coach. So physical work, demand more every day. If you're a player, push yourself every day to bring intensity to every minute of every session. And as a coach, you need to set the bar really high. Those are really valuable lessons. Another thing that comes to mind with Gilad, number 3 on my list, and I'll probably publish this article on my Medium channel. If you check me out on Medium, I have all my articles there, and also we have a new Substack, and you can subscribe to my Substack and get really high quality tennis essays, sports science, tennis commentary and analysis, particularly regarding junior development, in your inbox. So if you, just as an aside, consider subscribing to my new Substack. I'm very excited about it. Number 3 for Gilad is this obsession with footwork. And again, this parallels what I also learned in Spain, where in Spain they're obsessed with moving well, footwork, balance, body control. And in the same way, Gilad has always been, and probably always will be, obsessed with footwork. And I think that's one of the things that makes him such an elite coach, is that if you train with Gilad, you know that you're going to get blasted with a lot of footwork drills. Your agility is going to improve, your split step, your recovery, all of the essential skills that you need to move well on the tennis court. I mean, I learned that from him, and then I'm so grateful, because now I know all of the movements and skills that I need to teach to my students as well, especially when they're young. Young kids should be focusing on great movement. So be obsessed with footwork. Footwork's not an afterthought. In fact, many times with Gilad, footwork is the lesson. Footwork is the focus. Footwork can come first before anything else. And so that's something that I learned studying with Gilad, training with Gilad so many years, is to make footwork the highest priority. And that's another thing, man, you don't see that at a lot of clubs, do you? You don't see coaches preaching footwork and movement, working on that incessantly, obsessively. There's a lot of kids standing around, a lot of handwork, a lot of swinging, and not very much moving and learning all the skills. What I learned from Gil is a lot of intricate techniques to moving that if you teach those to kids, they're very beautiful, by the way. There's a lot of beautiful, sort of like dance movements that you teach to kids, and you get them to flow on the court. So there's an artistic element here too. You get this. You want to develop these beautiful dancers on the court, basically. And there's some movements there that I think are not often worked on. And Gilad has this knack for getting down to the nitty gritty and working on these specialized footwork movements to help players move like ballet dancers. It's a beautiful thing. So a footwork obsession, guys. Footwork obsession. Whether you're a coach or a player. This one I think is very, very interesting and important. For Gilad, mastering time, taking the ball early is the highest level of tennis. Reminds me of what Rick Macci said. Rick Macci teaches the same things to a lot of his top students. Take the ball early, take time away, command the court, and you can be a world-class player. So this is something that traditionally in Spain was not emphasized as much, and now in the new modern era of Spanish tennis, particularly with Carlos Alcaraz, you see that this has become part of the Spanish method, a progressive Spanish method. But Gilad's been saying that for decades. The highest level in tennis is taking time away. The greatest players in the world, they take your time away. They kill you, they kill your time. They take away your time. They make you feel pressure. They cut the angle. They take the ball early. They take the ball on the rise. And what that allows, Gilad always told me, what that allows is for players to transition better. So it opens up the all-court game. When you're able to take the ball early and take time away from your opponent, not only do you make it harder for them to make good decisions because they have less time to make decisions, you hurt their court position, but it also allows you to make the transition forward to the net. So one of the keys to the all-court game, which we'll touch on in a moment, is being able to take the ball early, to be able to move into the court and take the ball on the rise or at the top of the bounce. And so that's something that I always took away from studying with Gilad, that's an important skill that all players need to learn. Now there's some debate about when you should learn that. Should you learn that right away or a little bit later in the development? My opinion is you should learn that pretty young. You should learn at a young age, especially if you're a prodigy and like you're playing a lot of bigger, older kids who are going to moonball you in the 10s, 12s, 14s and up. If you're small and if you're really talented, you end up playing a lot of big kids. So it's really important to learn how to take every ball on the rise so that nobody can moonball you and so that you can play with anybody. Like that's how you have like a top 9-year-old, like this girl Vlada Ranchar, who I worked with for two years here in Vermont. She's now down in Florida training with Rick, and she's like one of the best 9-year-olds in the world now. And the reason she can play with anybody, she's like 9 years old with a 7+ UTR is pretty incredible. But how can she do that at a 9-year-old? It's because she's taking the ball early and nobody can hit the ball over her head, bounce the ball over her head. She can basically play with anyone because she takes the ball on the rise and she takes time away very well. That's just a good example that many, many prodigies do that same thing. That's sort of a blueprint for developing a prodigy, taking the ball on the rise. Because otherwise, you're little, and then the bigger kids or the adults, they sort of overpower you or they bounce it up over your head. And by taking it on the rise, you can circumvent that. So very, very important. So number 5 on the list of important lessons from Gilad is acceleration and spin. And I remember back in the day, even 20 years ago, 25 years ago, Gilad was teaching acceleration. He was doing some of the Spanish drills that I learned later when I traveled to Spain and studied with Luis Bruguera, one of the godfathers of Spanish tennis. I learned these acceleration drills from Spain, but Gilad had picked some of those up from his travels on the Pro Tour and studying in Europe, being in Europe. And he had, he's a very keen observer. And I think that's a quality that a lot of great coaches have. Even if they're players, they're always watching and trying to learn something new. And Gilad is like that and was like that. And he picked up a lot of really good exercises from Europe. And what I noticed when I was training with him and subsequently after I got injured and was coaching for him and working with him on the court as a coach is he had a number of exercises for acceleration to get more whip and to get oftentimes to learn how to use the wrist in a whippy way, to learn how to accelerate the wrist. Gilad talks a lot about the wrist, the movement of the wrist, and how important it is to be relaxed and whippy and hit around, for example, to hit around the outside edge of the ball, to make the ball dip. These are sort of mantras that I learned with Gilad, and now that I teach very similarly to my students, a very similar approach. But to get a good whip on the ball, to get a good topspin, to have a relaxed acceleration in the swing, and to generate enough topspin to make the ball dip, or even to put diagonal spin on the ball. These are some of the hallmarks of Gilad's coaching, and I think those are important, elements that all kids should learn. All kids should learn a good topspin. They should learn how to spin the ball, and they need to learn how to accelerate. If you're going to have good weapons, you need to know how to accelerate big time. And just a lot of places never work on that. Like you could be at a local club and 3-4 years go by and nobody once told you to accelerate, or you never once did a drill to accelerate, focusing on acceleration. They do that in Spain, and Gilad was doing that in Israel and New York City decades ago, before it became sort of en vogue. I wrote the Secrets of Spanish Tennis, and a lot of people started learning about Spanish methodology. And now you see on Instagram, people are doing acceleration drills. But, Gilad was doing that way, way, way earlier. So I give him a lot of credit for that. You work on acceleration and spin. Work on those elements, especially if a kid's young. Number 6, serve like a pro and make serving a daily priority. So for Gilad, one thing I observed over the years is the serve is paramount. Along with footwork and movement, the serve is so important to develop as a weapon. And also the attention to detail, getting back to the first number 1 on my list, which was the attention to detail, the technique of the serve. I see so many poor service actions out there around the country, around the world. I'm flooded with video from families and players from around the world on my WhatsApp, and I have a lot of international followers of the YouTube channel and things like that. And so I get a glimpse of the way serves are being taught around the world, and I know the United States very well. It's really shocking the level of serve technique in terms of quality that you see in young ages. And I don't know if this is because of a lack of coaching education or coaching knowledge, or if this is sort of like the result of poorly run red, orange, green programs, the developmental programs and sort of the grassroots level. But we see very, very poor service techniques. In my opinion, we see many children who are not serving enough. So they're not serving daily. They're not getting enough even physical movement, strengthening and developing mobility in the shoulder and the basically upper body musculature. So in order to develop a world-class serve, you have to serve almost daily. You should be doing the overhead movements religiously, regularly. Maybe you take a day off here and there, but it has to become sort of like a way of life, serving, so that it becomes very automatic. And also so you develop the muscles involved, the body. You use almost your entire body, every muscle in your body when you're serving. So you need to develop these muscles by serving. One of the best ways to do that is by serving. So when you see kids who maybe they're serving 5 or 10 minutes twice a week in a normal junior development program, you can imagine that over the course of several years, the serve doesn't get a lot of love and the serve doesn't improve that much. And so with Gilad, I just think part of his genius is, and always has been, that he's obsessed with developing a beautiful flowing service action. And I give him a lot of credit for that. Like, sometimes, a lesson will start with the serve. Sometimes you spend 30 minutes on the serve instead of just the last 5 or 10 minutes. Sometimes Gilad will serve twice a day. how many of you guys serve twice a day, developing your serve in the morning, afternoon, or before practice, and then after practice? Like the dedication and the diligence in the way that you work on the serve, I think really matters. It matters if you start that at a very young age. If you start that real young, over the course of many years, that will compound. The benefits will compound like an investment. And you end up with a player who's like 14, 15, 16 with a tremendous serve. And people say, how did that happen? How did you get such a good serve? Well, part of it is the attention to detail at a young age. So there's, to systematically build a serve. I think I learned that from Gilad, how important that is, to systematically build the serve, to biomechanically build the serve, to go over all the small techniques on the serve, to break it down when necessary and work on the individual subcomponents, and then to piece it all together into a beautiful world-class service action. I think that hundreds of players that I've seen, from professionals to elite juniors to top local players who train with Gilad, they all have beautiful serves. I mean, it's not a coincidence. And there's some people that have a knack for that. Some people have a knack. It's very rare these days teaching a world-class serve. Many coaches can teach tactics. Maybe they can teach a forehand or backhand. That it seems like the serve is sort of this very difficult hill to climb, mountain to climb for a lot of coaches out there. I'm not sure why that is, but certainly for me and for a coach like Gilad, we make building a world-class serve like our calling card. Like people come from all over the world here for me to work on their serve. I mean, I do video consultations on serve from all over. People from all over because apparently that's not very common in wherever they're from. There's not a lot of expertise on the serve, and I think that is very apparent when you go to look at young kids in tournaments like green ball tournaments, 10 and under yellow ball tournaments, 12 and under tournaments. You see a lot of very, very rudimentary serves with a lot of technical flaws, unfortunately. So if I could give probably one major piece of advice, easy thing to adjust in your training, is serve daily. Serve a large quantity of balls. Be careful, don't overdo it so you don't get injured, but serve regularly and daily. Do a robust amount of serving, and find someone in your area, or find someone like me, or find someone like Gilad who actually has built thousands of these serves at a young age, and get someone to fix that serve, make it beautiful at a young age, so you have no issues when you're older. That could be like performance issues or injuries. Number 7, build the all-court game. So I sort of touched on this, and I think this is not every coach has this philosophy. For example, Luis Bruguera, the godfather of Spanish tennis, whom I've studied with a lot in Spain, sort of believes that it's okay to be more one-dimensional, and that sometimes if you work on too many things, you can get distracted. But I think, with Gilad and many other elite coaches that I know, there's a strong belief philosophically in building a complete game. So that means volley, that means the overhead, that means proficiency in transition, that means drop shot, that means slice backhand. So for Gilad, he has a belief that you need to build all of these tools in a young player or any player. And so I've adopted that to a certain extent. I balance that with what I learned in Spain, because I think sometimes if you focus on too many things at once, the player can get lost. And sometimes it's better to drill down into one area, like hitting a good forehand or backhand, before you start working on volley and slice and things like that. And I've talked about that on other podcasts. But in the big scope of things, in the long arc of development, there's no way you should be like 16 or 17 and not be complete. When you're 7, 8, 9, 10, you can drill down into certain areas, but you always remember if you're a coach or if you're a player, you want to be as complete as you can. And if you look at the best players in the world now, you look at Alcaraz, you look at Djokovic, you look at Sinner, they're all working at getting more and more complete. Sinner talks about that in interviews all the time. And so even for the pros, they're still working on their games and becoming complete. But as a player or as a coach, it's a pretty healthy philosophy to say, I want a player who is complete by the time they get to full maturity. But one caveat is, be careful. Maybe don't teach everything at once. Try to break it up into chunks and teach the important things that matter at certain stages. Like for me, for example, I really believe, and I wrote about this in my new book, Winning Pretty, that the big focus when a kid's young is the serve, forehand, backhand, the topspin, forehand, backhand, and movement. For me, those are the big four. Like those are the areas that I overweight. And then when I feel I have a good, this is my personal philosophy. When I feel you have a good foundation of those big four, serve, forehand, backhand, movement, footwork, then I have in my mind, okay, I want these other attributes. I want to develop the complete game. But that can come a little bit later. I like to see stages of proficiency, stages of mastery. Sometimes, same thing in the microcosm of a lesson. If you have a lesson, if you did 10 minutes on 6 blocks of 10 minutes, sometimes I think that's very hard to learn that way. And you might be better off spending an entire lesson on one, drilling down into one area, like the forehand, or an entire lesson on just ground strokes, or an entire lesson on just movement, rather than trying to do everything in one lesson. So if you're a coach out there, consider that. And if you're a player out there, try to build strong foundation. Try to drill down into the areas you need to develop better. And in the big picture, make sure that you don't have any areas, major holes. Make sure you don't have a weak backhand. Make sure you know how to volley, feel comfortable with the net. Make sure you can hit a good overhead. Right. I just visited Gilad in Spain and Barcelona. He told me a funny joke. He said, not once have I seen anyone work on the overhead here in the last several months. And it's true. Like it's some of the academies, not every academy in Spain, but it's even some great academies. Like what are they working on? They're working on very specialized things. They're drilling down into ground strokes or forehand or backhand. They do some serving. But like it's possible. Months went by, nobody worked on the overhead. He said, it's incredible. He said, no, I haven't seen very few volleys and never once work on the overhead. That's what he told me. And I'm going to see him again in October because I make a couple trips to Spain every year. And now my old coach, my old guru is like in Spain. So I'm making like a double happy trip to Spain now. I get to be in Spain studying with Spanish coaches. And also my old coach Gilad is now in Spain. It's like a crazy coincidence, serendipitous situation that happened here. I can't believe it. But it's like pretty fun for me because I love to learn. I'm always curious. And what's even more interesting for me is to see the way that Gilad, now transplanted to Spain, the way he sees the deficiencies in the Spanish system. We talk about that a lot. And we share a lot of interesting ideas about what they could do better in Spain. For example, small example, but they never do split step in any of the drills in Spain. And Gilad pointed that out. And I think he makes a very good point. It's possible to do drills forever in Spain and never once do you integrate the split step. So your split step can get a bit rusty and sloppy that way. And that split step is very important for the first step. Remember, I told you Gilad's obsessed with footwork. But that's a good example where like some of the Spanish drills could be improved. And I've seen Gilad evolving some of the Spanish drills, the classic ones, adding some of his own insights and touches. In this case, adding like a good split step to allow the Spanish drills is very, very creative. I saw Gilad doing that on my last trip to Spain. Very interesting, actually. So, building the all-court game, number 7. Number 8, confidence and belief. So, when I was last visiting with Gilad, I hadn't seen him in a good amount of time. We communicate via email or text, but I've been so busy. He's so busy all the time. I actually haven't been on the court with him probably in 10 or 15 years that I can recall, which I can't believe it, but it's true. So it was so much fun for me just to be back on the court with him and hear his voice and see the way that he's working. Really great, really fun for me, just as a lifelong coach, student of the game, to be around such an amazing mind on the tennis court it's always fun for me. And then I was just reminded, I got memories of the way Gilad always had this aura. He has a lot of self-confidence, has a big personality, a lot of charisma. And I was impressed by that again in the last time that I spent with him. And I realized that that's a big part of being a great coach, is being confident, believing in yourself, believing in the work that you're doing, and transmitting that to the player. And when you're confident, you transmit that to your students. And so I just think developing that aura, that confidence around you, that invincibility, there's something special about that. And I think that the legendary coaches of all time all had that. And if you're a player, players have that too. Players have this aura of confidence and invincibility. And I think that's something that you can take away here, is that if you're a coach, try to develop that confidence and transmit it to your students. And if you're a player, try to develop that confidence, develop that positive belief in yourself. That's almost makes you larger than life, makes you invincible on the tennis court. Try to build that up. And I think that's a really good takeaway. Okay, number 9 and number 10. Number 9 relates to attention to detail, but it's basically, I call it back to the basics. And even for Gilad, everything is about the basics. Even for a high-level player, right now he's working with a top ITF junior, and every day that I saw him working, he's working on fundamentals. He's working on the basics. And you see that a lot of top coaches do that. They don't forget the basics. And you see the pros. You see Sinner still working on drills from the basket. You see even top pros nowadays making adjustments to their technique to try to get a little bit better biomechanics. You see basic work makes a great champion. And so that is many times is repetition. And I think in today's world, where there's a lot of games-based approach, there's a lot of guided discovery, there's a big, powerful movement for ecological dynamics, which is basically coaching by adjusting parameters in the environment and letting kids learn through discovery. I like some of the elements of that type of teaching pedagogy, but I don't agree with it totally. I think that there's something lost when we don't have the repetition. We don't have the back to the basics skill work. And so I'm very grateful to have been able to spend so much time with Gilad, who in a way rejected the new style of teaching that you see that's very common nowadays, which is guided discovery, which is games-based approach, GBA, which is ecological dynamics. He's basically rejecting those. He's very traditional, skill-based, repetition-based, fundamentals-based approach. And I'm not saying that's the only way to teach, and I believe there are some good elements in guided discovery, even in ecological dynamics, so let the environment shape the player. There's a lot of good stuff there. So I don't want to sound like I'm just on one-dimensionally viewing this. But in general, I think we've lost a lot of the back to the basics approach, fundamentals, drills, discipline, repetition to achieve mastery, repetition to achieve greatness in a stroke or movement. And I think there's a large proportion of kids out there and adults who crave that. They're craving instruction. They're craving answers, not just parameters. They want answers. They want analysis. They want technical information. And for people who are out there like that, Gilad is a godsend. That type of approach, very few coaches teach like that anymore. Very few coaches teach discipline combined with good information and commanding instruction. And I'm not saying that's the only way to connect with a student, but I'm saying there's a demand for that. And I see the same thing. I have many students who come to me and they want information. They want to be pushed hard. The parents want them to learn discipline. and they need repetition to get better at this game. There's a lot of kids out there that need that approach. They need that basics and fundamentals approach, and they just can't get that at their local club anymore because the whole world of coaching and teaching has moved to games and entertainment and making things like a video game and competing at everything, and we've lost some of the essence of good old-fashioned drills, hard work, developing discipline, and engineering stroke mechanics. We've lost some of that. We've lost a lot of that. Very few coaches will teach that way anymore. So I think the coaches who are still teaching that way, like I'm able to teach that way, Gilad teaches that way, they have a unique position in the marketplace. There's a high demand for that skill and that type of coach. I also think that players with certain cognitive disabilities, players who have trouble paying attention, for example, players who maybe are, there's a buzzword now, neurodivergent, players who have any sort of learning disabilities and things like that. Many times players in that boat respond well to this traditional approach. The more fluffy, less detail-oriented, more parameters-based approach where you just sort of learn with guided discovery, it doesn't work for certain types of learners and certain types neuroscientifically, certain people with a certain type of brain wiring where they need structure, they need instruction, they need to be told what to do, not just ask questions or give fuzzy answers or find it in your own way. There's definitely a group of students out there who need instruction, traditional instruction, and respond better that way. I absolutely believe that. And this is a very interesting pedagogical conversation and very interesting debate in terms of educational philosophy. I'd love to get into it more, but essentially I believe that Gilad represents that sort of traditional model, and there's a big need for that, and there's a demand for that in the tennis community. That's just not available very often anymore, especially in the US, and it's all over the world now. So what do you guys think about that? Number 10, a warrior mindset. Embrace discomfort. Suffer. Push yourself. This gets back to the hard work and intensity we were talking about earlier. Gilad always pushed so hard. Every session I came to, I said, oh man, I'm going to suffer today. This, I think, is the sign of a great coach. It's like Robert Lansdorp type coaching. It's just, it's going to be brutal. You're signing up for the military. You're going to go be put through basic training, and you're going to be made to suffer, and it's going to be tough, and you're going to be in pain, and you're going to feel pressure, and you're going to be exhausted. And I think this is genius. Like this is another thing that's hard to find nowadays. Hard to find a coach who will push you like that. We live in a very politically correct, sort of soft country club environment where every kid's a marshmallow kid. They're treated with white gloves. And, this is something that for better, for worse, I learned from Gilad. He's a tough coach. He pushes hard. He builds discipline in the players. And if you train with a coach like that, if you train with me, it's going to be the same. You're going to learn how to be strong. I'm going to make you tough. I'm going to teach you how to suffer well. You're going to learn to embrace suffering. You're going to learn to overcome pain. You're going to learn to build up your endurance. And I just think that's a lost art. Along with teaching the basics and technique, learning discipline is a lost art. And that's what I think makes Gilad such a special individual, and so it's kind of a unique place to be in the coaching world because he embodies that. And that's something that I took into my coaching as well. So if you're a coach, you can try to develop certain aspects of that. And if you're a player, try to seek out coaches who don't always keep you in your comfort zone. Learn to be uncomfortable. Learn to get out of your comfort zone. Find someone who challenges you, who pushes you, who you're maybe a little bit intimidated to go to the lesson every week. That's sometimes not a bad thing. Not a bad thing to feel a little bit worried about what's this guy going to do to me this week, because those challenges are what stimulate you to become great and tough and strong. So those are my top 10, guys. What do you think? Were any of those salient for you? Drop a comment, let me know. Do you find any of those interesting or controversial? Or maybe you disagree with some of the top 10 that I said. Let me know. We can talk about it in the comments. And I will see you guys on the next program. We're trying to roll out the podcast. We're trying to get back on a regular schedule, so I hope you enjoy. We'll be talking a lot about junior development, sports science, even sometimes health and human development, which is something I'm studying in school under the rubric of kinesiology and exercise science and health and human performance. These are areas that I'm interested in, but we're always going to stay true to the main focus of the show, which is high performance junior development, how to develop prodigies. All right, guys, God bless. I'll see you on the next program.